What's up, YouTube? In this lesson, we'll build out this landing page we designed in our previous lesson in Webflow. So we'll be going from Figma to Webflow. I'll leave the link to the Figma file in the description below, and also the Webflow clonable with all the images in there if you'd like to follow along. So we'll start by setting up our style guide. I'll head to my style guide page in Webflow and also to the style guide page in Figma. So we're going to be working on our typography styles first. We can launch the free plugin here called Token Studio, and this has all of our typography styles saved. So we can start with our font weights, and if we head over to our variables here in Webflow, let's go down to our different font weights, which are over here. We'll head to the font family folder, and that has everything related to font grouped together. So right here. So our primary font family, this is the font family for the body, is Object Sans. So we can just click on that and change that like so. Object Sans has a 400 and a 700 weight. It doesn't have a medium weight, so I'll just leave that alone for now. And then we're also going to add our heading font family, which is our secondary font family. So we'll create a new font family variable up at the top. We'll put it in the font family folder, and we'll call this secondary family. So let's go ahead and set the secondary family over here to be this formula family. And then we'll also need the weight for that. So we'll add a size variable. We'll call this secondary black. So let's change this here. And we'll go ahead and create that. And then let's link that up. So this will go and it'll link to the font weight folder. And we'll go ahead and grab the 900 weight. So now that we have those set, we can start setting up the other utilities or other variables. Like we have our letter spacing here is 0 and negative 1%. So we have 0 here. We'll need to change this to negative 0.01 EM and rename the variable also. And that's the same as negative 1%. And then for our line heights, we have 150, 130, 110, and 90%. So in Webflow, that would look like 1.5 EM, 1.3 for 130, 1.1, and then for 90%, it would be 0.9. And we can rename the variable here also. So once we have that set, let's go ahead and set up our different typography styles. So we know we'll have this display heading, for instance. And if we take a look at this display, I'll edit this token. It has the secondary family, secondary weight. It has the, this is the font size. It has the line height of 90%, -1 letter spacing, and uppercase. So let's just apply all that with the display selected. We'll throw on the secondary family. We'll throw on the secondary weight, which is black. We'll do the line height, letter spacing, and text transform is uppercase. And then for the H1, it's going to match all the same styles. I really didn't change too much there. The font size is all still the same in Figma. So it'll just be secondary family, secondary weight, and then the line height, letter spacing, all that can be fine, and text transform uppercase. And we'll do the same thing for H2, second family, second weight. Let's go ahead and all of that can be the same, and it's also going to be uppercase. So we can go ahead and look at our, I think the H2, the only thing that's different is we removed the letter spacing, set that to 0. So I can go ahead and set that right here on the H2. And then below the H2, our H3 is still going to share a lot of the same styles. So we can go ahead and set that as well. I'll do secondary family, secondary weight. And then we'll also leave all that the same. I'll probably match the letter spacing from the H2 and then also set uppercase. Now for the H4, this is where we actually changed the font family. So if we edit this, you'll notice it's primary family, primary bold, and letter spacing uppercase. So here it's inheriting from the body's font family, which is the primary family. We can just leave that set, but we will need to change the weight to primary bold. And letter spacing, line heights, all fine, and we'll set this to uppercase. And then the rest of the fonts just follow through with that. So inherit from body actually, and then the weight can be bold. All of this can be the same except we're going uppercase. And then we'll do the same thing here, inherit from body, switch it over to bold, and make it uppercase for the H6. So then we can go ahead and set the body styles here, and that can be the same as our paragraph style. If we edit this token, the font size is 18 pixels. So if we do 18 divided by 16, that's 1.125. So on here, we'll do 1.125 rem. This is all fine. The same line height, 1.5, letter spacing 0, text transform none. Now we do have some different font sizes. We have a paragraph large size, which is this one here, and a paragraph small. So we can just edit that token. There's no paragraph sort of large and small by default in Lumos, but we can just add that in. And basically all of this is just the weight and the line height, and everything else matches the body style. Really, it's only the size that's changing. The family and all that stays the same. So I'll go ahead and create, we have these periods here in front of all of our font size related things, and 2 periods for any of the miscellaneous utilities. This just keeps them all grouped together because Webflow sorts the folders alphabetically, and the periods don't show up in the class name itself or in the variable name. So if we want to create a size variable real quick here, we can go p large for a paragraph large, and we can make that the folder, and then we'll have font size in there. And let's create one more size, and we'll call this p small for paragraph small, and we'll also put font size. So now if we scroll down, we should have p large, p small, and our p large is 24 pixels, which is divided by 16, 1.5 rem. And if we look at our paragraph small, let's just edit that token, and its font size is 14 pixels, which 14 divided by 16 is 0.875. So we'll add that in here. And now that we have those set, we can, let's add the classes for those 2 things we just added. So let's duplicate this. Let's call this paragraph large. Let's be sure to give it an FS 7.2. So that's going to be our large style. That'll be the class for that. And let's duplicate this again, and we'll do 7.1. Actually, 7.2 is going to be the small one. 7.1 will be large. So the numbers just kind of go in this order. So let's bring this up here. This will be the large one, and that'll be FS 7.1. And then the small one, paragraph small, is 7.2. And we really don't have to worry about the classes, and the tags are all styled from those variables for all the other things, H5, H6, paragraph. We just need to add these 2 new ones we just created. So to do that, we can just open our custom code, go to typography, and we'll copy over this FS7, that's the paragraph class, and we'll just add one in here. We'll do 7-1, so this is our large size, and we'll apply font size of p-large. So we can remove that, and we're only interested in font size, and we'll do 7-2, and that is going to be paragraph small font size. So we're just connecting these classes to the Webflow variable. And now if we save that, we get our large and our small. So all that's set and good to go. Our different font weights are in here. We did add a new font weight. If we go to typography one more time, so we have the primary, regular, medium, bold, but we added a black, secondary black. So I could just add that in, create a font weight for class, and set it to be secondary black. So that way it's just connected. If we want that heading weight in a class, we can use it there. And I can just duplicate this card, create a font weight 4, and then set this here to font weight 4. And that'll be the black weight when we add on the correct family to it. So now that we have that set, we can go ahead and look at our colors. Pretty much everything in here should have stayed the same except the actual color values themselves. So we can open up our variables, and let's minimize this, and we'll go to our Figma variables, and we'll head over to the swatches, and let's open this up. So I'll just drag this out. So we have dark here. We'll want to throw that into dark here. We have light, which is just white. We have our brands, which I can copy that and throw it in here. We'll have a light fade, which is white at 20% opacity. And then a dark fade will be this dark color at the same 20% opacity. And we just have these same ones in here as well. So then we can head over to our different themes. And if we want to just take a look at this for a minute, so we're going to make sure everything's still good with those themes. So let's head over to our custom code. Let's head over to color, and we can start with the light theme. So the light theme's background is set to light, its text color is set to dark, and its border set to dark fade. And if we look at this, our background is light, text is dark, border is dark fade. So all that's correct. The solid buttons should still be correct. I think I did change the outline button. So we'll notice its background is transparent, the outline button's border is brand, and its text is dark. And then it hovers brand's background, brand border, and dark text. So if we check out, this is our outline button in light mode. Its background's transparent, its text is dark, but we would want to set its border to be brand. And then we would want, when hover, its background to be brand, its border to be brand, and its text color to be dark. So if we were to save that, now this outline button has an orange and it hovers orange with black text. So now that we have that set, let's just make sure that our outline inside of light mode is good. So all the theme background and borders, the solid, all that stayed the same. So that's all still good. And then we're going to have an orange border and white text inside dark mode, and it'll hover orange with a dark text. So if we're in dark mode right here, we're looking at our outline button. It's transparent, its text is light, its border is brand, it hovers brand, and then its text is dark. So all that should match Figma. Yep, that looks good. And then same here, yep, inside light mode, the solid button, inside dark mode, the solid button's hovering light. So all that looks good, matches what we had in Figma. Let's go ahead and link up our other variables. So we have things like our container max width, which I usually just take the size of my entire design, which is always 1440, divide that by 16 pixels, and that gives you 90 rem. So that's the container max width of the whole thing. And we also have a grid gap here, which I believe I did change in here. If we go to our sizes and we look at our grid gap, I set it to 12 pixels. So I can set that to 12 divided by 16, which is 0.75. I can either type that in, or I can link it into there's a whole adaptive spacing folder already here with all the different spaces from 12 pixels, 16, whatever we want. So if we come back to that grid gap for a minute, which is right here, I can just go to the space folder and link it to the 0.75, which is 12 pixels. And I might as well do that for the vertical gap as well. These are just anything at 2 or above will adapt and shrink a little on each breakpoint. So that will help a little bit with responsiveness. And when we check out our radius values here, we have a 6 pixel, 16, and a round. So if we go ahead and look at radius, 6 divided by 16, that's 0.375 for our smallest value, 375. This one is still 1 rem, 16 pixels, and this one's round. So that's good for those. We can look at our section horizontal. So we have two horizontals. We have a main and a large, and that is our page padding here. So our main is 2 rem. That matches what we're seeing here. I'm not doing the adaptive sizes because I'm controlling this page padding responsively for each breakpoint manually, just to have a little more control. But I will add in another size variable for page padding large, just because this design called for it. So we can head over to our page padding, which is right here. And then our large version is 5 rem. I'll just throw that in right here. And then we have our section verticals, a small, main, and large. Those are 3, 5, and 9 rem. And that matches what we have here. These are just linked to our adaptive spacings, so that's good. These are all the same spacings that we have in Webflow already. And our border width, we changed to 2 pixels. So if we just take a look at that border width, which should be right here, let's change that to 2. So those are really all of the variables we need. We'll also have our different components. So I have a button component in here, and if we take a look at it, we need to remove, I guess, first of all, the rounded corners. So this is our button with link component. Inside it is just the button component in case we need to use it without a link or wrapped in something else. And if we open that component, let's remove this font weight 2 utility from it. And let's remove the border radius from it. So we can also select this icon and delete that SVG icon. Don't really need that. And then for our button text, we set this to the FS 7.2, the smallest paragraph style, but we gave it bold and uppercase. So we can just throw in here FS 7.2, which is our small style. And then if we want it bold, we can throw in our font weight 3, which is the bold one for the paragraph style. And let's also just throw on the text transform uppercase. So all that's good to go. And I think that's really everything we need for our different components. That sets up the whole style guide. And if this was a multi-page site, that would really come in handy to keep things consistent, especially for larger sites. So let's go to the home page now, and let's start building out our different components and sections. So I'll delete this hero, and the first thing we're going to have, let's go over to home. We have this nav. So I'll go ahead and drop a div. It needs to be outside of the page main, and I'll go ahead and switch its tag over to be nav. And we'll go ahead and give this a class of nav wrap, and we'll position it absolute to the top of its parent. Let's give it a high Z index, like 1000. And inside of that, we'll go ahead and add a custom element, and we'll give this a class of nav contain. We'll give it a tag of container, so it has the default padding, max width, margin auto, everything we need there. And we'll go ahead and throw on a space of 1 rem to the top. And let's also add space 1 rem to the bottom, just to give us some padding in that. And we'll apply flex to center and space apart. So inside that contain, let's add a link block, and we'll give it the class of nav logo wrap. And inside of that, let's go ahead and select this whole SVG here. We'll right click, copy as SVG, and we'll basically just open the SVG import Webflow app, and we can paste this in, Command V, and we have our logo here. And we'll just give this a class of nav logo SVG. And let's go ahead and give this a width. So we have a width of 262 pixels. Using the Lumos Chrome extension, we can do 262 space enter, and it converts it to rem for us. And we'll also want, so this is linked to the text color of its parent. We want this to be linked to our brand swatch. So I'll just give this a nav logo brand class, and I'll go ahead and set the font color on it to be the brand swatch. And let's do the same thing for this piece down here. Just give it that same nav logo brand, and that way that's set up. So now that we have that set, let's drop a div inside our nav contain, give this the class of, we'll just call it nav menu, or actually let's just start a new component. We'll call it menu wrap. And inside that, we'll have a link block, and we'll give this the class of menu link wrap. And inside that, we'll have some text, and we'll give it the class of menu link text. And we can go ahead and copy this text over. It's just our regular paragraph font style, so we don't really need to change anything there. The padding or space between it is 24 pixels, which if we divide that by 2 is 12. So that way we can just have padding of 12 on each side of this link. So if we want to just link this to our space variable, and we can do 0.75, and we'll do the same thing on this side, space of 0.75. And I'll actually just throw in a little bit of top space too, maybe one rem of top and bottom. And that way that is set, good to go. Okay, and so we have this link. What I usually like to do is make it a component. That way if we ever need to add like an extra div or underline or something in here, we don't have to go to each link individually. So if we just create a component, I'll call it menu link. And we'll go ahead and link its text here to a field called text. And we'll create, and let's link its actual URL to a field called URL and create. And so once we have that component, we can just duplicate it a couple times. And I know we have services, projects, products, blog. So let's throw this text in, services, projects, products, and blog. So those are our menu links. Let's, that should all be good. Yep. All right, that looks good. So from there, we can go ahead and start building out our hero. So I'll just drop in the section starter component and unlink it. That way it already has the correct attributes attached and tags, and it has a container in there, everything set up and good to go. So I'll just give this a class of hero wrap. And we'll want to set custom top and bottom padding on it. So I won't actually use the attributes for section padding. And this theme 0 just means it's going to inherit from its parent's theme. So that's good to go. And then inside, we'll go ahead and give this a hero contain. And let's go ahead and drop, we'll have this layout here. It's a 10 column grid. We have this section with the title that's going to take up 6 of those columns. So I'll drop in a div in here, give this a class of hero list, apply a GD1 so it sets it to a display of grid, and then let's add a column desktop 10, so it's a 10 column grid on the desktop breakpoint, and inside that we can add a div, give it the class of hero left, and we'll give this a let's say column desktop of 6, so it spans 6 of those 10 columns on desktop breakpoint, and inside we'll add an H1. We can copy this class, this text, throw it in, and we can give this a hero title sort of class. And inside of this list, we'll also drop another div, give it the class of hero right, give it a column desktop of 4, so it's spanning 4 of those 10 columns. And inside we'll have some paragraph text, give it the class of hero text. And I believe this paragraph text is a larger style. It's an FS 7.1. So we can just throw that on, FS 7.1, and that is our large text. Let's copy it. Let's add the text in here. Let's go ahead and drop a a button with link component. So if we drop this in, button with link, and let's check the spacing here. So it looks like it should have 2 rem of gap, 32 pixels gap between this. So we can just add this as bottom margin to the text. Let's just add a space of 2 rem. So that's good there, and we'll probably just grab this whole list and align to bottom like so. So that's anchored at the bottom. We do have a little bit of extra space on this font, and it's just the font that we upload it has that space baked in. So what I would do to counter that is give it negative margin using EM. So that EM is based on the font size of the actual text. So when we reduce that text across breakpoints, once we get it set, we won't have to readjust the margin because it'll just scale with the font size of the text itself. So maybe something like negative 0.15, yep, and that locks it up perfectly in line. And when the font size adjusts, it'll just work. On this hero wrap, I'm going to give it like some kind of custom top padding just because it's a bit different, and I'll zero out the bottom padding on the section. And yeah, and then from there we can just drop under the list an image. We'll go ahead and choose our hero image here. Let's give this a hero image sort of class. We want to set the aspect ratio on it, which the width was 1376, so we'll do 13.7, and for the height we'll do 6. We're just moving the decimal point over 2 places for each of these to get a ratio. So we're just rounding it. We'll do a custom ratio. Width will be 13.7 and height will be 6, and that should give us the same ratio as our design. And we can just throw on our radius class of radius small, and that'll give it, round it off a little bit. We'll also just throw on some bottom padding on this list. We could do margin or padding, and I'll just throw on a space of something like 1.5 or maybe even 2, just to space it away from that photo. So now that we have this set, what I'm going to do is grab the whole body, and let's remove this theme too that's making the body dark. So we're just converting it over to light, which is great. Responsive wise, this should all just stack on tablet, which is great. I might, because here we have, what do we have? 2 rem space between this. Here we have 2. I might want the photo to be further apart from the content. So once we set the space, it's really easy across breakpoints to just click it and change it out. And we can do 3 rem or maybe even go up to 4 rem space. Okay, and we might want to increase the height of this photo just as we go to mobile. It's going to get kind of small, so we can up the aspect ratio a bit and go down 1 more breakpoint, up it a bit more, and yeah, that's looking good. For the nav for now, what I'll do on mobile is, so what we would do, building a responsive nav, is absolute this menu to the top. We'd give it some maybe a height of 100 VH. We would give it a background color of the theme background. So it's not button background, theme background right here. So it's like that. And we would probably start applying this container padding, page padding, which is so nice to be able to just like throw this on only on a certain breakpoint and not have to worry about it. Because I've needed to do this for so long now. And then we can just increase the top padding, increase the bottom padding, just basically build a mobile menu, set it to flex to go that way, potentially set overflow auto so it can scroll if it needs to, give the logo like a higher z-index than the actual menu, and add somewhat of a hamburger icon in here. And then the menu would just animate from display none to flex. So we could build a custom menu. I probably won't go into that right now just so we can focus on the rest of the build, but that would be how we'd set that up. So from there, let's go ahead and set up this section. And this is where we brought in our large container padding, which if we look right here, that is just the section large left and right. Let's go ahead and drop our section starter in here, and we'll go ahead and unlink it, and we'll call this basically our about wrap, and we'll go ahead inside the about wrap, select the container, give it about contain, and here is where we get to throw on that page padding large on the sides. So we'll just throw that on here, page padding large, there we go. And inside here, we'll have a 10, well, it's not really aligning to the grid. We kind of treat this as a one-off instance. So we'll just do a 2-column grid, a simple 50-50 split. So we'll drop a div in the contain, give it a class of about list, apply GD1 to set it to display grid, and add a column desktop of 2. So it's 2 columns on desktop breakpoint. And inside there, we'll have an about left. And we'll also drop in a div for about right. And let's go ahead and inside the left, we're going to have this component that we're going to be reusing throughout our whole site, this little subheader component. So what we can do here is I'll drop in a div, and I'll give it the class of subheading wrap. And inside we'll drop in another div, give it the class of subheading dot. And the dot's just going to be within height of 1 rem, just a 16 pixel dot. And we'll give it a background color of brand. So it's always just this color, regardless of the parent mode. And sometimes we'll want to use this subheading as an H2. Sometimes we'll want to use it as plain text, depending on like which title do we want to make the most prominent to read. So to do that, I will be adding a custom element, and I'll give this a subheading text class. And we can go ahead and set this to something like tag it as a span for now, and we can copy the sort of the content here. And we'll want to select the subheading sort of wrap, apply flex to align this way. And I believe we had a gap on here of something like, let's see, 12. So we can just add a gap of our space, and we'll throw on the 0.75. So let's go ahead and set this subheading wrap as a component. We'll call this subheading component. And let's go ahead and link its text, first of all, to a field called text. And then we'll link its tag to a field called tag. And that way, by default, the subheading component is kind of just a span, and then we can make it an H2 if we want it to be an H2. The only thing is we'll need to make sure that this text style is always the correct style, regardless of the tag that we have applied. So let's give it a FS7, which is the paragraph font style. So even if this is tagged as H2, it'll still look correct. And let's go into this and let's just style it how we want. So if we check out our tokens here, we actually did 7.2, so it's the smaller of the styles. And we did all caps and we did bold. So we can throw on our font weight 3, which is the bold one for the body copy. And we can throw on all caps, which is right here. And on this whole wrap, we can just go ahead and set the font color on it. So any text we add inside becomes brand. And that's our subheading. So if we take a look at this here, we have basically something holding the subheading, a group of title and paragraph together, and it's spacing apart this content list. So what I can do is we'll drop in a div, and we'll call this about content. And we'll drop an H2 in here. We'll go ahead and change out the text to be this text here. And we'll go ahead and drop in some paragraph text underneath. We'll go ahead and copy this. And let's see if this is the paragraph style. It is. And I also turned down the opacity on this text to 70%. I probably could have saved that as a text color to variable, but for now I'll just turn opacity down. So we'll do class it as about text, set the opacity to 70%, and class this title about title. Let's give it some bottom margin, and we'll throw in a space, and we'll do something like anything in here is fine. 0.75, that's fine. And then to create this gap between our subheading, we'll apply flex to the about left, vertical, align, justify, and that gap, I believe, was 2 rem. So we can just set that here, open up space, and set it to 2 rem, and that should space it apart. And then we'll have like these points list. So we can just drop in sort of a div, give this a class of about point list. And we'll want to make this a 2-column grid. I'll set it to 100% width so it spans all the space. Let's do GD1, and I'll do column portrait too, so it stays 2 columns across every breakpoint. And inside that, I'll drop a div, and we'll call this about point item. And let's see what kind of space we have on this. It looks like 16, so 1 rem, top and bottom, and we have the bottom border as well. So let's just throw that on now. We'll add our space of 1, and we'll set another space of 1 off the bottom. And let's go ahead and throw on the bottom border. We'll link that to our border width, and we'll link it the color to our theme border color. And inside, let's just drop a text block, and we'll call this about point, and we can do title or text. I'll do text in this case. And I believe we did the small size. So let's throw on FS 7.2. The line height is a little loose. I would like to tighten that up. So we can just come to line height, and we can go to our main line height folder within our variables and just choose a tighter one. Something like that's fine. And I'll just go ahead, copy this text, throw it in here. And yeah, I'll probably just create a component for this and about item, just in case I decide to add something extra to it, maybe for a hover state or something later on. Link this to a field called text, and go ahead and duplicate the item and change out the text in this one. And we'll know we'll have 6 of these, so let me just duplicate a couple times. Let's grab this text, can throw it in here, right there. Cool. Throw this one in, and throw this one in, and let's also throw this one in. Okay, so once we have these set, we can start inside our about right. We can add an image element, and we can choose our about image here. We can give this a class of about image, and we'll give it a height of 100% of its parent. And let's throw on our radius small, which is right here. And let's go ahead and give this about left some top and bottom padding. I'll throw on space of, let's say, space 2. And I'll also throw on space 2 here. And that way, it's just the photo is always a little bit taller than the text, but it's spanning 100% the height of the space for when the text wrap. And I believe we had a bigger gap here than our default grid gap. It's set to auto, so we'll probably just edit this, and we can throw on a space. And I might do something like maybe 3 rem of gap between these. So that's looking pretty good. And when we come down to this breakpoint, everything should just stack, which is nice. We could potentially take off this, so I can just click here and change it to space 0. And yeah, oh, wait, not for the gap, sorry, for the padding. Click, change the top, space 0. We don't really need that padding anymore. It was just to make the photo taller, and change it, the bottom, to 0. Cool, and I'm okay with this extra space on the sides. I think it looks pretty nice. One thing I meant to add in here, just for like certain breakpoints, we end up with some like widows. So on both of these, I'll throw on text wrap balance, TW1 utility, and that way it just keeps everything nicely wraps. No matter the screen size, the text stays kind of contained, which is nice. So that's good. This is wrapping good. And when we get down here, this page padding gets a bit too tight. And I think I would want all my large page paddings to just match the small one, the main one, from here on out. So what we can do is go to our custom code. We can go to responsive. And you'll notice our main page padding, which was 2 rem on tablet, we go 1.5. On landscape, we go 1. And then on portrait, we're going 0.5. So we're okay with the large page padding up until landscape. So what we could do is copy this variable on landscape, change page padding large, and we can make it match the main one, and then update it here too. Or what we can do instead is we can just link this to the page padding main variable on landscape. So that way, when we update the main one on portrait, the large will also just automatically update. We said from landscape on down, make sure large always matches the main one. And if we save that, now large becomes main here, and then here when main shrinks even again, it shrinks, and that's looking good. One thing I probably want to do is just center this text within the bounding box. So I can go on desktop to apply flex, and then align and justify center. And that way, when the text does wrap, the space is even. One thing I wanted to do was remove the vertical gap on this grid because the padding is being handled with the items. So I can just unlink this and 0 out the gap. And that way, these items are perfectly aligned, even top and bottom padding. And yeah, that looks great. So we might want to reuse this component in different places throughout our site. So you'll notice here, I've added the top spacing on this section to be the small, or actually the main section spacing, because it's following another light section. So I want to keep those kind of close. And before we go into a dark section, I want to give more breathing room. So I added the large section spacing off the bottom of this. So depending on where we use this in the page, we might reuse this module. We might want to change the amount of top and bottom spacing and also the theme of this section. So let's go ahead and make this a component. We'll call this content, we'll just call it content component. And so this is our section. We have these attributes for setting the theme. Right now it's inheriting from its parent's theme. We can just link that to a component field called theme. And we also have these attributes linked to our small, medium, large section variables in Webflow. So we can link this to a field called spacing top and create, and we can go ahead and link this bottom one to a field called spacing bottom and create. So now if we were to exit out this component, I could set the top to be 0 or small or main or large, and I'll keep it main in this case. And then the bottom, same thing, will go large. There we go. And the theme, we could leave it inherit from its parent. We could set it to always be light, always be dark, or we could set it to be the invert of whatever its parent is. So in this case, I'm leaving it light, or actually I'll leave it to inherit. But we could reuse this component and make it dark in some cases if we want it. So that's this whole section. And then from there, we can build out our CTA. So if we were to collapse all of this for a minute, let's drop in another section component. Let's go ahead and unlink this from its parent, and let's go ahead and class this. So we'll say CTA wrap, and inside we will have a CTA contain. And we'll go ahead and add a H2 in here, and we'll give this CTA title. Let's go ahead and copy this text. And on the whole section, the whole CTA wrap, we'll do text align center. And let's also drop in a button with link component. And we'll change the text of this, discover more, like so. Which I don't think I changed the text of this one. Should have said the same thing. Okay, and then let's add a little bit of space off the bottom of this. We can just CTA title, add some margin bottom. So if we add a space, let's say of 2, and that's fine. And let's give this a max width using CH just to get it to wrap kind of how we want it to. Something like that's good. With the contain selected, we'll apply flex and vertical center just like so. And with the wrap selected, we'll want to give it a min height of something like 80 VH so it fills most of the screen height. And we can apply flex to vertical and center the container within. We'll go ahead and give this CTA a theme of 2, so it's always dark. And the section spacings, we can just remove that and rely on the default spacing, which is the main version that's applied to every section by default. So once we have that set, let's go ahead and set up our different photos. So these all need to fall on a grid. And to do that, I'll I'll go ahead and duplicate this container. I'll reclass it to be CTA. We'll call this grid, or maybe we should call it image contain. And we'll put this back here, and we'll give it a position of absolute to cover the top of its parent. And actually, instead of doing that, I could just throw on our cover absolute utility, which makes it absolute to its parent and 100% within height. Let's see. And that should still respect our max width because it's a container. The only thing extra we need to do, actually, this absolutes it to the top left, which we don't want to do. So I will remove that. I will set it to absolute though, but to the top full. And that way it's still, the margin auto is still intact, and we can give it a height of 100% of its parent. Now let's go ahead and delete this text out of here. Let's delete the button. And inside here, we want a grid. So we'll drop in a div, give this the class of CTA image list, give it a GD1 column portrait of 10. So across every breakpoint, it stays a 10 column grid. We'll give this a min height of 100 VH. So it's probably going to go taller than the section. We're going to make sure that it always covers at least the full screen height. And inside of that, we'll go ahead and drop an image element. And let's give this the class of CTA image item. And I'll give this, make sure it's not set to lazy load. Anytime we're doing a marquee, we want to make sure it's set to auto load so the images don't flicker in. And I'll just choose any image from here, I guess the CTA image. And we want this to span 2 columns here. So I'll give this a combo of column portrait 2. So when the portrait breakpoint went up, it's spanning 2 columns. On the base class, I'll go ahead and give this a radius of our small radius, like so. So let's also duplicate this. Let's remove the combo. And for this one, we're going to want it to span 3 columns, and we're going to want it to start on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th column. So we will do column portrait of 3, so it spans 3 columns from portrait on up, and start portrait of 7, so it starts on the 7th column from portrait breakpoint on up. So that's going almost completely to the edge, and we can change out the image here to be our next CTA image, like so. Now let's go ahead and duplicate it again. This time we will add a different class. We're wanting this one to span 4 columns and start on the 2nd column. So we will do column portrait 4 and start portrait 2. So it starts on 2nd column, spans 4, and we will change out the image yet again. Let's duplicate it one more time, and let's remove the classes. We want this to span 2 columns, start on the 9th column. And so let's do column portrait of 2 and start portrait of 9. So it starts right there on the edge. And let's go ahead and choose this last CTA image. So what I'm going to want to happen here is probably to distribute these items apart. So it goes to the bottom. Actually, I can give this a min height of 100% of its parent. There's no reason really for it to go taller. And then I can give this some top padding using %. So it's just based on the width of the container. Maybe something like this. And I'll also want to make sure there is some gap, just so like on smaller breakpoints or smaller screen sizes, the images don't actually touch. And I guess I could handle that using a top margin off this image potentially. So something like 10%. And this one could be even further down. So maybe something like 12%, or increase it a little bit more. So something kind of like that, just to make sure they're not perfectly aligned. And we'll want this one, this one to be taller. So, or to be pushed up higher. So I might be able to give this some bottom margin. That's not quite working. Might have to give this one some negative bottom margin using %. Let's see if we can get it to pull down. Guess not. Some top margin. There we go. So yeah, if we give this one some top margin, it pulls it up. Yeah, space this one out a little bit. Move this down. And then now we can add the space apart like so, just so they fill all the space. And then we'll kind of want to just turn this into a marquee. So what I'll do is create a component here. I'll call this CTA images. And that way, if I change the structure, I add new images to it in the future, it'll work for both of them. So we'll duplicate this. So we have 2 of them. Let me remove the min height for a second. So you see the next one's down there. Okay, and then what we'll want to do is move this up. So we will grab the CTA wrap, set that to overflow hidden. Sections are by default are set to relative in Lumos, so that's fine. And then what we're going to be doing is animating this with a transform that moves it up to negative 100% of its own height. So it's just sliding this up, revealing the one that's underneath it, and then we reset to 0% and create an infinite loop like so. And to do that, I'll just use CSS. I really like this CSS only easy marquees. This is a Cloneable by Josh Jacobs that I use a lot. It's really smooth, lightweight version for marquees. So I'll just grab the code from this, and I'll just come over here and open this embed. This is the version for vertical marquee. Copy it, and it's targeting by class, but we really don't want to target by class in our case because we could rename these utilities, and if we change the class name, then it wouldn't link to the custom code. So what we can do instead is target by data attribute, and we can give this a CTA marquee sort of attribute, like so. There we go. And by applying that that one attribute to this one, because it's a component, it's automatically applied to the other one as well. And then we can head to our custom embed, paste in this code, change the class name. If we want to target by attribute, we replace with straight brackets and do CTA marquee. We don't need it to be absolute. We don't need this white space wrap. This will change, just helps with performance a little bit. And then duration of 20 seconds on our marquee, that's fine. And we want it to slide up to negative 100% of its own height. And so we can go ahead and save this, and there we go. Have a nice, smoothly animating marquee, and it'll just be infinite. It'll go basically all the way up. And if we check on the responsiveness of this, it's working pretty well. The only thing is this text gets a bit large, I think. And for most H2s that are only going to be like 5 or 6 words, that's fine. But for this one, where there's a lot of words, it's a full sentence in here, we might want to treat it as a one-off instance on mobile and detach the font size. That way we can just back it down without affecting the other H2s. So yeah, something like that, maybe even a little bit more. Something like that's fine on mobile, and this will just keep looping, and that's good. So then from there, we will set up this next section. I'll go ahead and make this CTA component just because we'll probably reuse it in different places. The theme can be hard baked into this. So let's just go CTA component, and we'll just allow us to change out the title and also be able to change out the button text, which we'll do here. And that way we can use this across pages. And also the button URL, And if we wanted to let ourselves choose between solid or outline for each component, we could do that, link this to a higher up field, but I don't really need to do that in this case. So now we have a reusable CTA component that we can change out. We could link all the images to fields, and yeah, that's pretty solid. So let's keep going. We'll drop in a section component. And section starter component. There we go. Let's detach it, unlink it, and we'll call this one services wrap. So if we want to just give this a class, services wrap, and inside we'll want to give this a class of services contain, and inside that we'll have kind of just a grid, 2-column grid, and this part should be the rest of the column, so 8 columns. So let's drop a div. Let's give this services list GD1 column desktop of 10 column grid, and then drop in another div and call this services left. And this will be a column desktop of 2. So this is the spanning 2 of those 10 columns, and drop in another div and call this services right. And this will be column desktop of 8, so it's spanning the remaining 8 columns. And inside this left, we can go ahead and drop in our subheading sort of component that we've created. One thing I do want to do is tighten up the line height on this, and then this square is getting squished. So we will want to set the square to don't shrink or grow, and then we'll want to grab this text here and adjust the line height. Go to our line height variable folder and choose maybe a tighter one. Yeah, that's good. Maybe slightly looser, 1.3. But yeah, just to make sure that this looks okay if the text ever had to wrap. And from there, we can just change out the text. And I'll just throw that on here. And right below that, we'll drop in an H2. and we can set the text of what we offer. But it is very close. Oh, and it's wrapping. It's very close to this. So what I'll do is give this a services title, and I'll throw in the FS3, H3 style, and make sure offer has a space. There we go. Okay, yeah. And then I want it to make sure that we always only have one word per line. So I'll throw on a max width using CH. That just basically makes sure this stays contained, something like that. And I can just throw on some top margin to create this gap, this little space here. Let's go ahead and go to our space folder, and let's throw on something like that too is fine. And so inside here, we have a 2-column grid, and I'll probably have that stay 2 columns all the way down till, I don't know, maybe landscape even, it'll stay 2 columns. So inside that, we'll drop in, that usually I'd call this CMS list, but it's not really a collection in this case, but I'll do something like services item list. And inside here, we'll have a, well, let's first of all give it display grid. We'll do column. Let's try column landscape 2. No, I'll do column tablet 2. So on tablet breakpoint on up, it's a 2-column grid. And inside that, I'll drop in an actual link block. We'll call this services item link. And we'll want to go ahead and give this some padding, some sort of radius, all of that good stuff. So let's go ahead and throw on our smallest radius. And let's go ahead and set this to overflow hidden position relative, so it crops anything we put inside. And I believe the padding was 2 rem on this, so I'll just throw on a space like so. And let's throw on 2 rem for now on all sides. I'll just to speed this up, I'll just throw it on non-adaptive, and there we go. And let's go ahead and give this a theme of 2 so that it's always a dark mode card, like so. And we'll want to make sure that we actually, because the links have a transparent background color by default, so we'll want to make sure we're actually throwing on theme background, and the links have a inherit font color. So let's throw on theme text to links. So there we go. And inside here, we're going to have this title and the text. So let's just drop in a text box. We'll call this services item title. And I believe this was, let's see, it's an H6, no extra kind of stylings. So let's just throw on FS6. Perfect. We can copy, or this text, I'll just type it out. And then let's throw on some paragraph text under here. And this is services item text. And this one, I believe we did the smallest size. So we can throw that on FS7, FS7.2. And I'll also just copy this text over. And let's see. We can paste that in. One thing I'll do just for larger displays, making sure the wrap looks good, let's throw on that text wrap balance again, TW1. And that's much better. Let's throw on some bottom margin on this. So we can just add our space, and something like that is good. So what I'll probably do inside the services, I'll drop a div, give this the class of services item content, and then inside I'll have this title, this paragraph text, and I'll drop in images in here as well. And we'll call this services item image. And we can give this one actually the cover absolute 1 utility. So it just fills the full width and height of its parent, positioned absolute. Make sure it's underneath the content and that the content actually has a position relative, so it sits on top. And we can just choose an image from here. I'll choose one of my services images. Great. And let's also drop in sort of a link, this SVG here. So I'll just copy his SVG, and inside our link, let's open up the SVG import. We'll paste it in here, and we will drag it to the top. We're right there. Call it services item SVG. Give it a position of relative. So it's, oops, that's the image. Let's undo that. There we go. Let's make sure we have the right thing selected. Services item SVG, and give it a position relative, and give it somewhat of a width, like so. We can give it margin auto off the left to push it over, display block so it works. And let's throw on flex to this, vertical, and let's throw on a gap. I'll do space 2 or something like that. And let's also give this a min height for the card, something like, how high do we need to go? Something like 20 rim, and then we'll flex to justify like so. So that goes apart. And then we can go ahead and just grab this whole card, make it a services or services card component, and we can create it. We can link the title here to a field called, let's link it to a field called title. We can link the text here to a field called text, like so. We can link the image here to a field called image. And let's link the actual URL of it, which is this, to a field called link. So now if we create, we should be able to adjust this, all the content of this card. I'll go ahead and duplicate it a couple times so we have all the cards we need. And then that should fill up our section. That's allowed to wrap. Here, which is cool, we can actually remove the max here on this breakpoint, and we can link it back under font size to the H2 sort of font size here. So it starts matching all the other H2s. We only really need it to make it smaller on the other breakpoint. And the gap here, I probably could have edit that vertical gap even from desktop. And let's do a larger space. We could do space 3. One thing I want to start using more mindfully is the grid gap vertical, which I could set that grid gap vertical there. And that could be the gap between like text and image, for instance, if that's what I decide to use it for. And in that case, I would set that grid gap vertical to the 3 rim adaptive spacing. And then anywhere I need it to create that separation between text and content, like here, I could have edit the grid, and instead of just linking directly to space 3, I could link to grid gap vertical. And that way, if I want to change the space between image and text when it stacks, I can do that across multiple things. Even this, even though it's not technically a grid gap, it's bottom padding, I could still link that to the same space between image and text. And that way, every space between image and text is always consistent site-wide. It's pretty awesome what we can do with Webflow variables now. So yeah, that's looking good. I mean, that should be responsive. I guess I should check these cards. So they were 2 column, 1 tablet, went to 1 column here, which is great, and continued to be 1 column all the way down, which is fine. So, and then because this is a light section coming off of a dark one, I will probably do, which it looks like I didn't do here, but I would probably do large on the top and main off the bottom to pull the light sections closer. So for the services wrap, I can do section top large and section bottom main. Actually, let me make this a component. Just if we want to feature our services on other pages in different places, I'll call this services section. We can use this, and then we can link it section top to the same spacing top. create it, and section bottom to that same spacing bottom, and create that. And in the instance of this one component, I will probably do large off the top. So that's looking good, fully responsive, and let's build out this next section. So in here, I'll go ahead and collapse this. Let's go ahead and add a section starter, and let's go ahead and unlink it. And here we have basically some stats. So I'll just give this a class, something like stats wrap. And inside we'll have the contain, and this will be stats contain. And inside that we'll have kind of a grid where this is taking up 3 columns and this is taking up the others. So let's drop in a div, call it stats list, GD1, column desktop of 10. And inside that, drop a div, and we'll call this something like stats. Oops. Let's give this a class. Stats left, column desktop of 7, and inside there, let's add our little subheading component. Let's copy this text and throw it in here. And let's go ahead and drop maybe an H2. Let's copy this. Let's throw it in here. And I'll give this a stats title. I'll give it an FS1 just to make it larger, and I'll give it a different max width just to try and get it to wrap where we want it to, something like that. And I'll give it a margin off the top of something like space 2. This is something else I could have made a variable, was my space between my subhead and my heading. That would have been a nice little variable to have. So, and then let's drop a div in here, and let's call this something like stats right, and let's give that the column desktop 3. So it spans 3 of those columns. Let's drop a paragraph text in here and give it stats text. Let's make sure the font size is regular paragraph size. Yep, that's good. Let's throw this in here. And I'll just throw one for larger sizes, text wrap balance, just to make sure it stays nicely contained. Let's align it to the bottom, which now that I know how much space, it doesn't matter whether it's H2, H3, it doesn't matter what the font size is. The amount of space we need to make it align to the base, which is always going to be negative 1.5 EM. So I could just create even a variable in here for that, where we have, so all of our generic size variables have these 2 periods in front of it. So I could create a size variable called heading margin. I'm sure there's a better way to name this, heading margin main. And let's go ahead and set that to the negative EM value. And that way I can just link this to heading margin main. And that way that aligns. And then when we come down here, I can throw on the same heading margin main here. And that way that should perfectly align. Yep. And that's just going to work across the board. And if we ever change our font and actually don't need this negative margin, we could just zero it out from one place and not even have to worry about going to every page. It's really amazing. So let's collapse this list, and we'll create our different items here. So let's drop in a div. Let's give this a class of stats item list, and we'll give it the same sort of GD1 column desktop 10. And to create this space between them, which is 48, I'll just let's give it some top padding. If I just do 48 divided by 16, that's 3 rem. So space of 3 rem. And inside here, I'll drop in a div, give it the class of stats item card. And for this, I'm going to give it that top border. And that's our top border there. So let's throw on this border off the top, border width. And for the color, we're going to link it to the theme's text color. And inside of that, we also have some bottom padding of 12. So we can just throw that on here. Space, and we'll do 0.75. This here is just, I think, regular paragraph style. Yep. So let's go ahead and drop some text block in here. And we'll call this stats text. And we can just change out the text. And then we'll also have another text block. And we'll call this stats number. And for this, we want to use, the font style we used is display, which is really large. I might throw on FS1 just for now. Just back it down a little bit. I don't know, I can try display too. But then let's change out this text to be the number, like so. Let's set this to be font color of transparent, so we can just reach for our swatch transparent so we don't have to detach anything. And let's give it a stroke. Really wish we could link stroke width to our border width variables, but we can't. Let's give it a border or stroke outline of brand. And let's go ahead and give this a combo. So these need to span 3 columns. So we'll give them a column desktop 3. So they're spanning 3 of those columns. Let's give this some bottom margin. I'll just throw on a space of something like 1 rem's fine. And let's duplicate this whole card a couple times. And then for the first one, we'll give it column desktop 4. So it's spanning 4 of those columns, and that's good. Let's go ahead and copy the number out. I'd probably need to throw Fluid font sizes onto my display, and then it would be fine to use it and with it fitting in the grid. But if I used a display right now, it would probably break out past these columns because it's so large. So let's just throw this in here and make sure this is good. And then something like this. All right. And then, so that's good. The spacing between this is good. I could probably remove the top space on this section, and so that I could do theme top of 0. Bottom, we can do large. And then this will stack here. This, I believe I linked it to the, what did I link this to? Should have linked it. So this was linked to the spacing, but I probably could just link it to the grid gap vertical. And that way it's just consistent with the other sections. So that's good. This is just stacking on this breakpoint, stacking here all the way down. Looks great. Yeah, so that's good. So from there, let's go ahead and build out this CTA, which I can just drop in, or I guess this is more of testimonials. I'll call it a story section. So I'll drop in a section starter here and detach it. And I'll just give this a class of story wrap. And inside we have our story contain, just in case we need to do any special styling to that. And in here, we really just have, we'll drop in some content. So div, we'll call this story content. And in here, we'll have this large, I guess we'll go with like an H. Well, it needs to be probably, I don't know if it would be an H2. It might be a text block. And then we'll call this, though, story title, and we'll class it FS1. And we will copy this text, throw it on here, and get it to wrap how we want it to wrap, giving it a max using CH. So something kind of like that is probably okay. Yep, that's good. And then this here was probably an H6 if I had to guess. Nope, it was a paragraph bold in all caps. So let's drop in a text block. Let's add in the text. Let's call this story text. It's already FS7. We want to make it bold, so font weight 3 here. And we want to make it all caps, which is right here. And I can just add some space of like 1 or something off the top. Yeah, that's good. And then we have these arrows, which I didn't actually make arrow components, which I guess I should have. So for that, I can just, where's our button components? Right here. For now, I'll just, I'll just make a new one. So we know we want this to be a custom element. We know it needs to be a tag of button. We know these buttons usually need area labels on them and something like previous and next. And we will give this, so all our buttons are fitting into a class. If we check it out, a folder of button, then main, then wrap. And then this one should be button play wrap. So this one can fall into button arrow wrap. And we can just give this whatever width and height we want. So I have, let's see, I have 64. So I can just do 64 inches for rim. We can give it a radius of, I guess, just round. So we'll link it to our round radius variable. Border width, we'll want to link it to the border width main. Border color would be our button's border. Background would be our button's background. Text is going to be the button text, which is right here. And then on hover, we would change this to the button's text hover. The background would change to button's background hover. And the border would change to button border hover. And that's good there. Seems about the same size as the play button. And then we can go ahead and just take this arrow, if we can copy it, copy as SVG. And let's head over to our SVG import app. Let's paste it in. And let's give this a class of button arrow SVG. We can give it like a % width of its parent, so it'll resize if we ever resize the parent. Something like 40 or 35% is probably fine. This should be flex to center if it wasn't already, just to make sure that's right there in the middle. And then we can give this a button style attribute. And that way we can choose if we want solid or we want outline. And let's go ahead and create a component here. We'll call this arrow button. And we'll say link this value to a field called button style. Create. And let's link this value to a field called area label. And since this is an arrow, we can also add an attribute of like rotate, or I'll call it arrow rotate. And I'll set the default value to false, but I'll link that to a field called arrow rotate. And so that way, if we want to flip this, let me just copy this and throw one in here. We can just add some custom code inside our custom here that anytime we have an arrow rotate that equals true, then we apply a CSS sort of transform that rotates this by -90 degrees. save this and let's test it out. So we should be able to come to this component, throw on arrow rotate true. Oh, negative 180, my bad. Negative 180 degrees. And save it. There we go. And so now we should be able to have arrow rotate true, choose the area label, and choose the style, which this one is solid, and these are the outlines. Perfect. So now what we can do is we've made a new button component. We can head to our home page. We can come down over here to our testimonial section. We can drop in a story. We'll call this story arrow wrap. And we can apply flex like so. And the gap between these, I believe, was 12. So we can just throw in our space. And we'll paste this in. We will duplicate it. We will give this an area label of next. And we will give the arrow rotate on this one to be true. Oh, did it not save my... I don't think it saved my custom code. Yeah, it didn't save my negative 180, so let's save that again. There we go. And for both of these, we'll throw in button style too. There's definitely a glitch in here where it's not saving that code. Usually refreshing the page helps if you ever run into an issue like this. And it's because I'm changing the attribute values while I'm doing this. But okay, that's good. And then this space, I didn't realize that was consistent 24. So what I could have done instead of margin on this is just apply a flex like so and add a gap of space 1.5 like so. And that should space it all evenly. Good. And then on the story wrap, I'll throw on a theme too. So it becomes dark. And I will probably remove these because the space can always be the same. Usually if it's a photo background, then the space will be pretty consistent. So let's throw an image in here. Let's give this the class of story image. Let's give it the cover absolute 1. Let's throw the image to the story image, which I believe is this one. Yeah. Cool. I'll auto load it because why not? And then inside the contain, we'll need a list of these little cards. So for that, I'll just drop in a div. Let's call it something like story card list. And for this, I'm just going to do, kind of want it to, I think I want it to overflow like a slider normally would. So I'll just apply flex. I'm not trying to force these to fall within a certain grid. And we can add a gap if we want of our grid gap, just so it like kind of has the same gap as other things, but that's not too important. And then I'll actually add a button element, which not that, a custom element, which there's actually an HTML button component in Lumos that you can unlink, and it's already tagged as a button for you with everything we need. So I'll just give this a story card item, I guess, something like that. And I'll just give it a width of, I'll do 100% of its parent for now. And let's throw on a attribute and let's do theme 1. So it's always light. The buttons have a transparent background by default, just to clear out some defaults. So for those, we will have to apply the theme background. We might as well apply the theme text while we're at it. And then we'll also throw on kind of the radius small. And let's do overflow hidden, position relative. And let's add this padding. So there is 4 pixels padding on most sides, but there is 7 pixels padding off the top. So we can do 7 space enter to convert that to rim, 4 space enter, and I do option enter to apply to the other sides. And on this side, rim, there we go. And then the photo here, we can just drop in an image, and I'll just call this story card photo or card image. And we'll just choose one from our images here. Let's give it somewhat of a width. I believe this one had a width of 90. So let's just do 90, space enter. I'll back it down to 5.5. And let's throw on our radius medium or small. And let's give it the ratio of square. And then let's make sure this has flex. So it goes to that side. And inside that, we can drop a div, call it story card content. And in this content, we'll go ahead and add, I believe this is a paragraph, but it's bold and it's uppercase. So let's drop a text block and call this story card title. And let's add on the font weight 3. Let's throw on the uppercase. Let's copy this text. And I believe the line height, we want it to do something tighter in this case. So we'll go line height of 1.1. And let's throw another text block. Story card text. Button components must have text align center by default. So let's do, or button elements. So let's just do left align just to get that working. And this is the smallest possible style. So this should be FS 7.2. And we should copy that text. Throw on the 70%, which opacity, since I'm using that in so many places, I really should have made that a text color 2 variable, but that is what we'll do here. And let's go ahead and throw on a gap of space. Let's do, 1 rem's fine. And we can turn this whole card into a component called story card. And we can go ahead and duplicate the component till we have 4 of them. And, or maybe just 3 for now, just to leave it in. And let's go ahead and grab the whole kind of container. We'll apply flex to that. And let's go ahead and throw on, our grid gap vertical, just to space it evenly. And from there, that's good. That's getting a little tight. Actually, because this section is so supposed to be large and impactful, I'll throw on a section vertical large, and I'll just bake this into the class. We don't need to use attributes because we're not going to change that. Off the top and bottom, I think on the bottom, actually, I went small just to get those cards closer to the bottom of the screen. Yeah. And that's good. That looks all right. And then here, I might just start setting these cards to don't shrink or grow and kind of just let them overflow a little bit, something kind of like that. And we can always, I would eventually just handle this with a swiper of sorts, but for now, just as a mock concept, I'll throw 100% width on there and just call it a day. Okay. That should have been a tighter. Oops, I keep thinking I have the utility for that, but that is now native variables. So let's go over here. Let's throw in a tighter line height, 1.1. And now we'll actually probably need some bottom margin off this title, space of 0.2 or something like that. Okay. And yeah, that's a good story section. And the very last thing we have is our footer, which should be pretty simple. What I'll do for that, it needs to go outside of the page main. So we'll just drop a, let's go ahead and drop our section starter, and we'll unlink it. And we'll go ahead and change the tag on this to be footer. And we will give this a class of footer wrap. Let's see. The top on this I did, what did I do? Small, and the bottom of this I did section horizontal for some reason. I think I'm just going to throw section vertical small on top and bottom for the footer. And for that to work, I will need to remove those attributes, which is fine. We won't be changing that from page to page. The theme, no matter what the parent is set to, will always be light because we want dark text. And we can go ahead and copy this kind of logo element as an SVG, and we'll throw it in this container of sorts. I think actually what I'll do is I will remove the section padding in this case, because I want the container to have a min height of 100 VH, so it fills the full screen. And then I'll throw the section vertical small on the top and bottom of the container. That way I don't have to worry about this. It will always fill the screen. And then inside here, we'll open up SVG import, paste our SVG. So it's like, there we go. And then I'll drop a div. Let me just give this a class. Oops, I gave it a class of container. That should have been footer contain. And this should be footer top. And this should be footer SVG. And I should apply flex to go this way, distribute it apart, and add a space of something like 3, a gap of some sort, and maybe even larger than that, something like that. And then off the top, I could drop in, what I will do, let me just copy this whole menu wrap, and I'll throw it in here, and I'll call this, I'll remove the class, call it footer link wrap. And I will basically go vertical with it. And what was the gap on these? I think I did, I'm just going to use the same sort of components for now. Sometimes I even like to make this the exact same component as the menu and style it different with custom code, so that if we add a link down here, it also adds the link down here, which can be nice. But in this case, I'll do negative, I think we said 0.75 rem. Yep, that gets it to align perfect. And I will, what I'll do on this link wrap, detach font size, bump it up a bit, throw on a font weight bold potentially. Nope, we want to keep it light. Throw on a tighter letter spacing, which is over here. Yeah, paragraphs should just inherit by default. Yeah, so we can do tighter letter spacing. Make this a little bit smaller font size. Something like that. And then the footer top can be flex to the top, justify apart. I'll copy this little guy as an SVG, and I'll paste him in here and call this footer, oops, here we are, footer SVG. Give him kind of a width of some sort. And then we can grab the whole footer wrap and give it a background color of brand. And then from there, that is our footer. So that should be fully responsive all the way down. This SVG, I probably should have given, oh, I used the footer SVG. So I'll call this footer logo because I used the footer SVG already. So yeah, that's fully responsive. Good to go. Let's give this, probably should have given this some top margin just to push it apart off of that a little bit. There we go. Yep. This is kind of large, so could detach that in this case and bump up the font size a little bit. Yep, something like that's good. That looks all right. And then we just turn this into a component and call it footer. And that's a day. So yeah, that wraps up everything about how to build this fully responsive lander in Webflow using all the Lumos variables. I hope you've enjoyed this